Hey there, amazing fans! Before we dive into today's drama, don't forget to subscribe, smash that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support means the world to us. Now, welcome to another relaxing moment with Shuga Stories. Grab a seat, sit back, relax, and let's journey into the story together. The palace of Eldira never slept. Beneath its golden towers and sprawling courtyards, life pulsed through the corridors like blood through a living body. Servants hurried along polished floors, nobles lounged beneath painted ceilings, and the throne, an ornate seat of ancient oak and gold, stood tall, watching over all. Among the invisible hands that kept the palace running was a girl with no name. She moved like a shadow. 17 years old, silent as breath, she scrubbed floors and fetched water. Most called her scrub rat or nameless. Some didn't bother to speak to her at all. She'd arrived at the gates 12 years ago on a storm-drenched night, no more than 5 years old, barefoot and trembling, holding nothing but a strange pendant and a name no one ever asked for. The pendant was her only possession, silver, shaped like a crescent moon cradling a star. She never let it leave her neck. "Faster, girl!" barked Lady Venna, nearly tripping over her as she scrubbed the hall floor. "Yes, my lady," she whispered, bowing her head, hiding the flash of resentment in her eyes. The nobles saw a servant, but in truth she was far more. She watched. She listened. Behind her quiet gaze, she memorized their steps, their secrets, their betrayals. She noticed which guards swapped shifts, which nobles disappeared into the wine cellars at night, which servants whispered of treason when they thought no one could hear. The girl had made the palace her study, and she, its silent student. One rainy night, she followed a guard through the west wing. Hidden behind a moth-eaten tapestry, he opened a panel in the wall. He didn't see her silently slip through before it closed. She was in a forgotten corridor, dimly lit by old lanterns. At the end, she found an ancient door. Pushing it open, she entered a secret chamber filled with dust and silence. The forbidden section of the royal library. She stepped forward, torch in hand, trailing fingers over brittle scrolls and books too old to be read. Her eyes caught something on the wall, a portrait. A woman, regal and calm, stood painted in gold and crimson. Her hair was dark, her eyes, familiar. And on her shoulder, a star-shaped birthmark. The same one she had. Her eyes dropped to the plaque. Queen Liora of Eldira. Vanished with her daughters 18 years ago. The torch slipped in her grasp. The flame danced dangerously on the floor before she quickly stooped and caught the torch again. Her breath was quick, her fingers trembling. The woman in the painting, she looked exactly like her. Not similar, identical. The high cheekbones, the depth in her hazel eyes, the faint curl of her lips. And then that pendant, the same crescent moon cradling a star. And that birthmark, her birthmark. Could she be her mother? The girl sank to her knees, staring up at the face frozen in oil and time. "Queen Liora," she whispered. The name felt strange on her tongue, and yet familiar. Like a lullaby once sung to her in sleep. The plaque read, "Vanished with her daughters 18 years ago." Daughters. Not daughter. Daughters. Twins? The idea coiled in her mind like smoke. Had she once had a sister? She stood slowly, thoughts reeling. Her fingers brushed the frame, then reached behind it, feeling for anything hidden. Her hand touched a notch. Something clicked. A narrow drawer opened beneath the painting. Inside lay an old parchment. A family tree. At the top, Queen Liora and King Theron. Below, 2 branches. Eldira. Isla. The ink was faded, but the names were clear. "Eldira," she whispered. The word warmed something in her chest. She touched the name. Could that be me? She grabbed the parchment and slipped it inside her tunic. Then, like a ghost, she slipped back into the corridor and out through the tapestry. That night, sleep eluded her. When she finally drifted into slumber, her dreams were a tempest. She saw fire. Screams. A woman cradling 2 babies, whispering words in a language she didn't understand. Steel. Blood. A crown tumbling to the floor. And a baby's cry. She awoke with a start, the sheets tangled around her, drenched in sweat. The pendant was warm against her chest, almost pulsing. The next day she returned to her chores. But her eyes were different, her movements sharper. She found her way to the palace archives, slipping in during the changing of the guards. There she sought the palace historian, Master Wyron, a stooped, silver-bearded man who rarely looked up from his scrolls. "Master Wyron," she said cautiously. He blinked, surprised a servant would address him. "Yes? What is it?" "I found a painting of Queen Liora." His expression changed immediately. He set down his quill. "Where did you see it?" "I was just cleaning near the west wing and—" "You're lying." His voice was calm but cold. "That section is sealed." He stood, suddenly towering. "Forget what you saw. Never speak of Liora again. She's a ghost. A danger. Her memory is forbidden." "But—" "I said forget it." He turned his back to her. She left without another word. But that night, something changed. She awoke to a creak in the hallway outside her quarters. Then, footsteps. But silent. Too deliberate. She slid from her cot and pressed her ear to the door. A shadow passed under it. She backed away slowly. The door was kicked open. 3 masked men poured into the room. She dodged beneath their reach and sprinted for the kitchens. "Get her!" one of them yelled. She darted through the pantry, overturning barrels. A cleaver flew past her shoulder. She hurled herself into a dumbwaiter shaft, sliding down into the lower kitchens. She didn't stop running until she reached the servants' tunnel, the same one she'd found weeks ago. She scrambled inside and pulled the panel shut behind her, her breath ragged. The last thing she heard before silence swallowed the corridor was one of the masked men growling. The bloodline must remain buried. Darkness swallowed her as she slipped into the secret servant tunnel, the sounds of pursuit fading behind her. Her breath came in ragged gasps. Each step echoed louder than the last, bouncing off the stone like drumbeats in a funeral march. Eldira's fingers trailed along the damp, moss-lined wall. The air grew colder, thicker. She didn't know where the tunnel led, only that it was better than the blade that had just missed her throat. Her heart still pounded with the voice she'd heard. The bloodline must remain buried. She stumbled, catching herself on a rotting wooden beam. Ahead, the tunnel veered left, then dipped downward, curving in a spiral. An old lantern hung on the wall, rusted but surprisingly lit. Someone had been here recently. Eldira hesitated, then lifted it. The flickering light revealed an arched doorway carved into the stone, different from the rest of the tunnel. Vines twisted through the cracks, and a sigil glowed faintly on the lintel above, the crescent moon cradling a star. Her pendant pulsed with warmth. She stepped forward, heart in her throat, and pushed the door open. Dust swirled in the stale air. Inside was a chamber untouched by time. Scrolls and maps lay on a massive oak table. Tattered banners lined the walls, one bearing the symbol of the ancient royal house. In the corner, half hidden beneath a moth-eaten velvet cloth, sat a broken crown, its golden arch cracked clean through the center. And beside it, a leather-bound book. Eldira's fingers trembled as she lifted it. The cover bore a single word. Liora. She opened the diary. "To the daughter I lost. If you find this, then the winds of fate have stirred again." Eldira sat on the cold stone floor and read by lantern light, her world unraveling and rebuilding with every word. They came at dawn, cloaked in crimson and steel. Malik led them, my most trusted advisor, now traitor. They slew the royal guard, stormed the nursery, and demanded the crown. But I had foreseen this. My daughters, Eldira and Isla, born under the starfall moon, were never safe. So I split them. Isla I entrusted to the midwife Nera, who fled north. Eldira I hid within these very walls. But in the chaos, the nursemaid vanished. I heard only rumors she reached the outer gate during the storm. I do not know what became of my star-marked child. If you read this and the pendant calls to you, then you are Eldira. You are my daughter. And the throne is yours. Eldira's tears fell silently. All the years of isolation, of being called nothing, of believing she had no worth, it had all been a lie. She was not a nameless servant. She was born of royalty. A princess hidden in plain sight. She traced the final line again. And the throne is yours. A sound stirred behind her. She spun, grabbing a rusted dagger from the table. Easy, came a familiar voice. Jaren, the stable boy, stepped into the light, wide-eyed. Gods above, he whispered. This place, what is this? Eldira lowered the dagger. How did you find me? I saw them chasing you. Lost them near the grain stores. Followed the tunnel. He stepped closer, eyeing the relics. This is real? She nodded. I'm not who you think I am. Jaren gave a half-smile. I've always known that. She showed him the diary. The pendant. The painting sketch she'd hidden in her tunic. Jaren sat slowly, overwhelmed. You're the heir. No, she said softly. I'm the secret they tried to erase. Silence fell, thick and heavy. What will you do? He asked. Eldira stood, her fingers brushing the cracked crown. I'll do what my mother couldn't. I'll take back what was stolen. Suddenly, a crash echoed from the tunnel. Jaren pulled her back. Voices. Armored feet. They found the tunnel, he hissed. Eldira grabbed the diary and crown. We can't let them destroy this. She turned to the far wall, where another archway gaped like an open mouth. There's another way out, she whispered. How do you know? I remember. They disappeared into the shadows just as the door burst open behind them. In the dark, Eldira's mind swirled with fire and blood, her mother's voice, and the memory of a lullaby she hadn't known she'd forgotten. She had a name. She had a purpose. And Eldira's throne would know her name again. The palace of Eldira was a monument to grandeur and decay. Its gilded walls gleamed beneath the setting sun, but cracks snaked through its foundations like whispered secrets. Eldira moved through the corridors cloaked in shadows, her steps soft against the polished marble. She was a servant to the eyes of the world, a ghost among the nobles' laughter and whispered conspiracies, but beneath the surface, a storm was gathering. Since discovering the truth of her birth, her life had shattered and reformed into something both terrifying and empowering. She was not merely a nameless servant, she was Princess Eldira, the rightful heir to Eldira's throne, stolen from her by King Malik's ruthless coup. Yet the weight of that truth pressed down like the heavy crown she'd never worn. Malik's reign was ironclad, his spies lurking in every shadow, and his grip on the palace tightened with each passing day. In the bowels of the palace, beneath layers of dust and forgotten stone, Eldira met with the remnants of her mother's loyal guards. These men and women had survived the coup, living in silence and fear, waiting for a sign that the rightful bloodline might rise again. Marin, the oldest of the group, his face carved with scars and time, eyed Eldira with a mixture of skepticism and hope. You must understand, he said in a gravelly voice, King Malik is not a man to be underestimated. He has ruled with cruelty and cunning. If you are to reclaim this throne, you will need more than just courage. Eldira met his gaze steadily. I have no choice but to try. My mother was taken from us. My sister, somewhere out there. I will bring Eldira back. A flicker of a smile touched Marin's lips. Then we will stand with you. But you will need allies beyond these walls. The people of the slums despise Malik's rule. You must seek them out. The slums lay just beyond the palace gates, a sprawling maze of dirt paths, rickety shacks, and desperate faces. It was a world apart from the marble halls, but here the seeds of rebellion sprouted. Eldira slipped through the twisting alleys, her servant's cloak pulled tight, until she came to a small camp where a band of rebels gathered around a fire. Jorin, their leader, stood tall, his sharp eyes gleaming in the firelight. When he saw Eldira approach, he narrowed his gaze. You're no ordinary servant, he said. If you claim the blood of the lost princess, you must prove it. Eldira nodded, recounting her story, the pendant, the birthmark, the diary. The rebels listened, their expressions shifting from disbelief to cautious hope. You have guts, Jorin said after a pause. But this fight will cost you. Your life, your freedom, your very soul. Weeks passed in a blur of whispered meetings and stolen moments. Eldira trained tirelessly with the rebels, learning to wield a sword and move with stealth. The weight of her lineage rested heavy on her shoulders, but with every swing of the blade, she felt closer to the woman she was meant to be. One night, as the fire crackled low, Jorin produced a dagger from beneath his cloak. The blade was cold and sharp, and on its handle was an engraving, Isla. Eldira's breath caught. "We found her," Jorin said quietly. "Your sister. But she's not the girl you remember." The revelation cut through Eldira like ice. Her sister, alive, but changed, twisted by the very man who had stolen their family. The dagger felt heavier in her hand than any sword. The road ahead was darker than ever, but Eldira's resolve burned bright. She would reclaim her crown, and her family, no matter the cost. The grand ballroom of Eldira glittered like 1,000 stars trapped in crystal. Enormous chandeliers hung from the vaulted ceiling, casting soft light over the swirling masks and silk gowns of the nobles gathered for the annual masquerade ball. The air hummed with music and whispered secrets, laughter hiding betrayals, smiles hiding daggers. Eldira stood at the edge of the room, her silver mask catching the light, a delicate veil over her face. Her servant's dress was gone, replaced by a borrowed gown from a loyalist who risked everything for her. But beneath the finery, her heart thudded like a war drum. She wasn't here to mingle with nobles or indulge in luxury. Tonight was a mission, a chance, perhaps the only one, to find Isla, her sister, the other half of a broken past. For years, Eldira had clung to the hope that Isla was alive. Now, after hearing the name whispered by rebels and seeing it engraved on the dagger, she knew it was true. But what kind of person had her sister become? The music swelled, and the dancers twirled, their masks hiding eyes that gleamed with ambition. Somewhere in this room, Isla moved like a queen born to command, strong, dangerous, unyielding. Eldira's breath caught as she spotted her. Isla's armor glinted beneath her elegant mask, a warrior princess forged in Malik's cold mold. Her posture was rigid, every movement sharp and purposeful. She was a statue carved from stone, beautiful, yet terrifying in her strength. Eldira stepped forward, heart pounding, every nerve alight. Their eyes met across the room. A flicker of recognition, or perhaps something deeper, passed between them. The world seemed to narrow, the crowd fading into a blur. "Who are you?" Eldira whispered, her voice trembling. Isla's blade was drawn before a word could be spoken. The steel gleamed under the chandelier light, a silent threat. "Why do you look like my dreams?" Isla's voice was cold, but beneath it lay a tremor, a crack in the armor she had worn for years. The two sisters circled each other cautiously. Neither knew the full story, only shadows and echoes from their fractured past. "I'm Eldira," she said softly. "Your sister?" Isla's eyes narrowed. "I was told you were dead. I was hidden. You were lost." The words hung in the air like a fragile thread, one neither dared break. Isla's hand hesitated, then lowered her sword an inch. Her memories stirred, flashes of a star-shaped birthmark, a silver pendant left behind in the chaos. "Show me," she demanded. Slowly, Eldira pulled back her sleeve, revealing the faint star-shaped scar burned into her skin. Isla's breath hitched. Her sword wavered. In that moment, a fragile truth passed between them. Two souls bound by blood, separated by fate and lies. Before the moment could deepen, chaos erupted. Palace guards stormed in, their armor clanking, eyes scanning for threats. Isla's blade flashed to Eldira's throat, a silent warning. But her eyes searched Eldira's face, confusion and something like hope flickering within. The guards seized the sisters, dragging them apart. Isla glared back at Eldira, a silent promise hanging in the air. "Why do you look like my dreams?" Eldira's heart shattered. The journey to reclaim the throne had just become a battle to reunite a family torn apart, and the greatest enemy might be the sister she had once longed to find. The damp stone walls of the palace prison echoed with the clink of cold chains. Eldira sat on the hard floor, bruised and aching, but her spirit burned brighter than ever. Outside, the city of Eldira was a tinderbox. Fires bloomed like deadly flowers in the alleys, and the sound of clashing swords and desperate cries surged like a storm. The rebellion was no longer just whispers in the shadows. It was real, violent, and unstoppable. Her captors thought this was the end. But Eldira's story was only beginning. The heavy iron door creaked open, letting in a sliver of torchlight and a familiar figure. Isla. Her face was a mask of conflict, eyes torn between loyalty and doubt. "Eldira," she whispered, voice low and urgent. "I don't understand. Why did you come back?" Eldira struggled to rise but managed a faint smile. "Because this is who I am. The blood of Eldira runs through me. And you're my sister." Isla's hands trembled as she reached out, brushing the silver pendant around Eldira's neck. "It's real." "Yes," Eldira said, her voice steady. "Our mother's last gift to me. To us." In the flickering torchlight, the years of brainwashing began to crumble. Isla's eyes filled with tears, confusion battling the lies she had been told. "If what you say is true," Isla breathed, "then what do I do now?" Eldira reached out, her hand steady. "Choose who you want to be, not who they made you." Slowly, Isla moved to unlock Eldira's chains. Freedom tasted bitter but necessary. Outside, the rebellion roared to life. The rebels stormed the palace gates, smashing the king's soldiers with fierce determination. Flames licked the sky, illuminating a kingdom desperate for change. Eldira and Isla moved like shadows through the labyrinthine halls. For the first time, they fought side by side, their swords flashing, their hearts beating in unison. But no battle is without its price. In the throne room, King Malik stood tall, a cruel smile twisting his lips. Isla was in his grasp, held hostage with a blade pressed to her throat. His voice was cold as ice. "Choose," he hissed. "Your crown, or your sister's life." Eldira's sword wavered. Her mind screamed, but her heart was clear. "I choose her," she said, voice breaking with fierce love. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Then, with a roar, Isla broke free, turning on Malik with a ferocity born of truth and sisterhood. Together, they struck the usurper down. As Malik's lifeless body fell to the cold marble floor, the palace erupted in cheers. The people poured in, their voices rising in triumph. Eldira, once a nameless servant, stood tall, her crown shining like a star reclaimed. Isla knelt beside her, no longer a pawn, but a queen reborn. In that moment, Eldira was more than a kingdom restored. It was a family reunited, blood and fire forging a future none could deny. The grand hall of Eldira's palace was silent, save for the heavy breaths of those gathered within. Outside, the streets buzzed with the roar of the people, citizens who had risen like a tidal wave, answering the call of the lost princess and her fierce sister. Eldira stood at the base of the throne, her heart pounding like a drumbeat of destiny. She was no longer the nameless servant who had once swept these floors in silence. Tonight she would claim what was hers, the crown, the kingdom, the future. Her silver pendant caught the flickering torchlight, casting shimmering patterns across the stone walls. Beside her, Isla stood tall and resolute, her eyes fierce but soft with newfound understanding. Together, they were the blood of Eldira, two halves of a broken family, reunited by fate and fire. King Malik's final stand had crumbled in the chaos of rebellion, but echoes of his treachery still lingered. Nobles who had once sneered at Eldira now knelt before her, faces flushed with shame and fear. A hush fell over the room as one elder noble approached, bowing low. "Forgive us, your majesty," he murmured, voice thick with regret. "We did not see you for who you were." Eldira's gaze was steady. "I was always your queen. You just never saw me." Her words hung heavy in the air, both a declaration and a challenge. The crown was heavier than she imagined when placed upon her head. It was not merely gold and jewels. It was the weight of history, sacrifice, and hope. She looked to Isla, who knelt beside the throne, no longer a servant, no longer a weapon forged by lies, but a queen in her own right. "Eldira," Isla said softly, "this crown, it's not just yours. It's ours." Eldira smiled, her heart swelling with love and relief. Together, the sisters stood united before the court, the people, and the future. Their story was one of blood and betrayal, but also of redemption and strength. The kingdom of Eldira would never forget the day the nameless servant sat on the throne, because it was the day the true queen returned home. Months later, the palace had begun to heal. Walls repaired, gardens blossomed, and laughter returned to the halls. Eldira ruled with wisdom tempered by hardship, while Isla led the new guard, protectors of peace and justice. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Eldira found herself in the palace gardens, the silver pendant resting against her chest. A gentle breeze whispered through the trees, carrying promises of a new dawn. She was no longer a shadow in the halls. She was the light, the queen who rose from ashes, who wore the crown not for power, but for her people. And as the stars began to twinkle overhead, Eldira whispered to the night sky, "I was always your queen. You just never saw me,